Captain Jake Morrison sat in his small office at the military base. The morning sun came through the dirty window. He was drinking his third cup of coffee when Commander Phillips walked in with a strange look on his face. "Jake, we need to talk," Phillips said. He put a thick folder on the desk. "You're getting a new assignment." Jake looked up from his reports. He had been training soldiers for 15 years. Most of them learned how to survive in the wild, fight without weapons, and stay alive when everything went wrong. It was hard work, but Jake loved it. "What kind of assignment?" Jake asked. Phillips opened the folder. Inside were pictures of strange creatures. Some looked like giant insects. Others seemed to be made of light. One looked like a walking tree. "You're going to teach aliens," Phillips said. Jake almost dropped his coffee. "What?" "The Galactic Federation wants a human instructor. They need someone to teach basic survival skills to their cadets. You leave in 3 days." Jake stared at the pictures. The aliens looked nothing like humans. How could he teach them anything? "Why me?" Jake asked. "Because you're the best survival instructor we have. These aliens are smart, but they don't know how to survive without their machines. Their leaders think humans can help." Jake picked up one of the pictures. It showed a blue creature with 6 arms and gills on its neck. "This is crazy." "Maybe, but it's also important. The Federation is our ally now. They helped us during the Mars crisis. Now we help them." Phillips left more papers on the desk. "Read these tonight. Your ship leaves Tuesday morning." After Phillips left, Jake sat alone in his office. He looked at the pictures again. The aliens were so different from humans. They lived on different planets. They breathed different air. Some of them didn't even have solid bodies. How could he teach them to survive? Jake spent the next 2 days reading about the aliens. The blue creatures were called Mervadi. They lived in the oceans of their home planet. The light beings were luminals. They got their energy from their sun. The insect-like ones were part of something called the Hive Collective. They shared one big mind. On Tuesday morning, Jake stood at the spaceport. He carried one small bag. Inside were his knife, some rope, and a few basic tools. Everything else he needed, he could make with his hands. The ship to Kepler 442b was huge. Jake had never seen anything like it. Alien crew members walked around the halls. Some had fur. Others had scales. A few seemed to be made of metal. The trip took 5 days. Jake spent most of the time in his small room, reading about the planet where he would teach. Kepler 442b was bigger than Earth. It had 2 suns and 3 moons. The air was safe for humans to breathe. The gravity was a little stronger than Earth's. When the ship landed, Jake saw the Zephyrian Academy for the first time. It was a massive building made of silver metal and blue glass. Towers reached into the sky. Gardens filled with strange plants surrounded the main building. A tall, thin alien waited for Jake at the landing pad. The creature looked like it was made of crystal. Light moved through its body like water. "Captain Morrison," the alien said in perfect English. "I am Velkoth, director of the Academy. Welcome to Kepler 442b. Jake shook the alien's hand. It felt cold and smooth. "Thank you for having me. Come, I will show you to your quarters. Then we will discuss your mission." They walked through the Academy halls. Everything was clean and bright. Alien students moved in groups, talking in languages Jake didn't understand. Some carried devices that looked like small computers. Others had tools that glowed with their own light. Velkoth led Jake to a simple room with a bed, desk, and window. "This will be your home for the next 6 months. I hope it is comfortable." "It's perfect," Jake said. "Good. Now, let me explain why you are here." Velkoth sat down, and his crystal body made a soft ringing sound. Most species in the Federation evolved differently than humans. We became smart very quickly. We learned to build machines to do everything for us. We can travel between stars, cure any disease, and create anything we need. That sounds amazing, Jake said. It is, but it is also a problem. Our people don't know how to survive without machines. If their equipment breaks, they die. If they get lost, they can't find their way home. If they are hungry, they can't find food. Jake nodded. He was starting to understand. Recently, we fought a war with a species called the Wraiths. They have weapons that break our machines. Many of our soldiers died not because they were defeated in battle, but because they couldn't survive when their equipment stopped working. So, you want me to teach them basic survival skills? Yes, things that human children learn: how to make fire, how to find water, how to build shelter, how to hunt for food. The next morning, Jake met his students. 24 aliens from 12 different species stood in a large classroom. They all wore the same blue uniforms, but they looked completely different from each other. The Mervadi students had to wear special suits filled with water. The Luminals looked like walking stars. The Hive Collective members spoke in perfect harmony, finishing each other's sentences. "Good morning," Jake said. "I'm Captain Morrison. I'm here to teach you how to survive." A tall, gray alien with 4 eyes raised his hand. "Captain Morrison, we have studied your teaching materials. We do not understand why we need to learn these primitive skills." "What's your name?" Jake asked. "I am Cadet Zar Thul of the Nexus Confederation. I have 3 degrees in quantum physics and stellar navigation. I can calculate the trajectory of a starship through 17 dimensions." Jake smiled. "That's impressive. But can you make fire?" Zarthul looked confused. "Fire? We have plasma generators for heat and light. What if your plasma generator breaks? We would repair it with our maintenance tools." "What if your tools break too?" Zarthul was quiet for a moment. I do not know." Jake walked to the front of the class. "That's why I'm here. Machines break. Technology fails. When that happens, you need to know how to survive with nothing but your hands and your brain." He pulled out a small piece of flint and a steel striker. "This is how humans have made fire for thousands of years. It always works. It never needs batteries. It never breaks." Jake struck the flint against the steel. Sparks flew into a small pile of dry grass. He blew gently, and the grass caught fire. The alien students gasped. They had never seen fire made without machines. "Who wants to try?" Jake asked. A young Mervadi raised her hand. "I will try, Captain Morrison." Jake gave her the flint and steel. "What's your name?" "I am Cadet Flowsinger." "All right, Flowsinger. Hold the flint like this. Strike it with the steel. Don't be afraid of the sparks." Flowsinger tried to copy Jake's movements. The flint slipped from her wet hands. She tried again. This time, she held it too tight and couldn't strike it properly. After 20 minutes, Flowsinger finally made a few small sparks. She was so excited that she started singing in her native language. "Very good," Jake said. "Now, who else wants to try?" One by one, the alien students attempted to make fire. Some did better than others. The Luminals had trouble holding solid objects. The Hive Collective members kept waiting for orders from their group mind dot by the end of the first class. Only 3 students had successfully made fire. The others looked frustrated and tired. "Don't worry," Jake said. "Human children take weeks to learn this skill. You did well for your first day." As the students left the classroom, Jake heard them talking among themselves. They seemed surprised that something so simple could be so difficult. That evening, Jake sat in his room and wrote his first report to Commander Phillips. He explained how different the aliens were from humans. They were incredibly smart, but they had never learned to use their hands to make things. They could solve complex mathematical problems, but they couldn't tie a knot. Jake looked out his window at the alien sky. 2 moons hung above the academy. Strange birds with 4 wings flew between the towers. Tomorrow, he would teach his students how to find water. After that, how to build shelter. Then how to hunt for food. It would be a long 6 months. But Jake was starting to think that maybe, just maybe, he could help these aliens learn to survive. The next morning would bring new challenges. But Jake Morrison was ready for them. Jake's second week at the academy was very different from the first. Instead of staying in the clean classroom, he took his students outside to the wilderness preserve. The alien cadets looked nervous as they walked through the tall grass and strange trees. "Captain Morrison," said Cadet Zarthul, "why are we leaving the academy? We have holographic training rooms that can simulate any environment." Jake stopped walking and turned to face his students. "Because holograms can't teach you how to really survive. You need to feel the dirt under your feet. You need to smell the air and hear the sounds of nature." The preserve was a large area of natural land around the academy. It had forests, streams, and hills. The plants were different from Earth plants, but they served the same purpose. Some gave food. Others could be used for medicine. Many could be turned into tools. "Today, we're going to learn how to find water," Jake said, "without machines." A luminal student named Brightspark flickered with confusion. "But we have molecular scanners that can detect water from a distance of 5 kilometers. What if your scanner breaks?" Jake asked. "We would use backup scanners. What if they all break?" Brightspark dimmed slightly. "I do not know." Jake smiled. "Then you would use your eyes and your brain." He pointed to a group of tall trees about 100 meters away. "Look at those trees. Notice how they're taller and greener than the others. That means there's water nearby. Trees grow better when they have plenty of water." The students stared at the trees. They had never thought about plants as signs of water. "Now look at the ground," Jake continued. "See how it's darker and softer near those trees? That's another sign of water." Jake led them toward the trees. As they got closer, they could hear the sound of running water. Behind the trees was a small stream with clear, cold water. "How did you know?" asked Flo Singer, the Mervati student. "Animals and plants always tell you where water is," Jake said. "You just have to learn how to read the signs." He knelt by the stream and cupped some water in his hands. "This water is safe to drink. It's moving fast, which means it's fresh. It's clear, which means it's clean. And it smells good." Jake drank the water. The alien students watched in amazement. "You drank water without testing it first?" asked a Hive Collective member. "I tested it," Jake said. "Just not with machines? I used my senses." For the next hour, Jake taught his students how to find water in different ways. He showed them how to follow animal tracks to water sources. He explained how to collect dew from plants in the early morning. He even demonstrated how to get water from certain types of leaves. The students tried to copy his methods. Some did, better than others. The Mervati students were naturally good at finding water. The luminals had trouble understanding why plants needed water at all. "This is much harder than using scanners," complained ZAR-Thul. "Yes, it is," Jake agreed. "But it will never break. It will never run out of power. And it will work on any planet in the galaxy." The next day, Jake decided to teach his students about making tools. Other instructors at the academy used advanced workshops with laser cutters and molecular assemblers. Jake took his students to the academy's maintenance area, where broken equipment was stored. "Today we're going to make weapons," Jake announced. The students looked excited. They expected to learn about plasma rifles or energy swords. Instead, Jake picked up a long piece of metal pipe from the junk pile. "This is going to be a spear." "A spear?" asked Brightspark. "That is very primitive." "Primitive, but effective," Jake said. He found a sharp piece of metal and began working. Using only basic tools, he attached the metal point to the pipe. In 30 minutes, he had made a simple but deadly spear. "Humans have been making spears for thousands of years," Jake explained. "They work just as well today as they did then." He threw the spear at a target 20 meters away. It hit the center perfectly. The students spent the rest of the day making their own weapons. Flo Singer made a trident that worked well underwater. A Hive Collective member created a net that could be thrown to catch multiple targets. Even Brightspark managed to make a simple club. "These weapons are crude," said Zarthul, "but I understand their value. They require no power source. They can be made from materials found anywhere." Jake nodded. "Exactly. Sometimes the simplest solution is the best solution." Word about Jake's unusual teaching methods began to spread around the academy. Other instructors came to watch his classes. Some looked skeptical. Others seemed interested. Lieutenant Lisa Parker, a human officer who worked as a liaison between Earth and the Federation, visited Jake's class during the third week. She watched as Jake taught his students how to build shelter using nothing but branches and leaves. "This is very different from our standard training protocols," she said to Jake after class. "I know," Jake replied, "but it works." Lisa looked at the shelters the students had built. They were simple but strong. "The academy directors are impressed. Your students are learning faster than anyone expected." "They're smart," Jake said. "They just needed to learn how to use their hands." The real test came during the fourth week. Jake arranged a survival exercise with the Academy's combat instructor, a large reptilian alien named Scarthane. Scarthane was famous throughout the Federation for his fighting skills. "Your students will face my advanced combat class," Scarthane explained. "All technology will be disabled. They must survive using only natural resources." Jake felt nervous. His students had only been training for 3 weeks. Scarthane's students had been at the academy for 2 years. The exercise took place in a large forest area. Both groups were dropped off at opposite ends with no equipment. They had to find each other and complete various challenges. Jake's students immediately began using their new skills. Flo Singer found a water source within the first hour. The Hive Collective members built a shelter before dark. Brightspark learned to make fire without his natural energy abilities. Meanwhile, Scarthane's advanced students struggled. They kept trying to use their broken equipment. They couldn't find food or water. Some of them gave up and called for rescue. By the end of the exercise, Jake's students had completed all the challenges. They had found water, built shelter, made weapons, and even caught food. Scarthane's students had failed completely. "This is impossible," Scarthane said to Jake. "Your students have only been training for 3 weeks. How did they defeat my advanced class?" "They learned to think like humans," Jake replied. "They learned to survive." After the exercise, something changed at the academy. Other instructors began asking Jake for advice. They wanted to know how to teach their students to think creatively when their technology failed. Jake started giving special lessons to the faculty. He taught them about human problem-solving methods. He showed them how to improvise and adapt when plans went wrong. "Humans are natural survivors," Jake explained to a group of alien professors. "We evolved on a dangerous planet. We had to learn to use tools, work together, and solve problems quickly. That's why we're good at surviving." The professors were fascinated. They had never thought about survival as a natural ability. Scarthane became particularly interested in Jake's methods. "Captain Morrison," he said one day. "I would like to learn human combat techniques." Jake agreed to teach him. They met in the Academy's training room after regular classes. "Human combat is different from what you might expect," Jake explained. "We don't rely on strength or speed. We use intelligence and creativity." Jake demonstrated basic human fighting techniques. He showed Scarthane how to use an opponent's strength against them. He taught him how to make weapons from everyday objects. He explained how to fight multiple opponents at once. Scarthane was amazed. "These techniques are so simple, yet so effective. Why didn't we think of them?" "Because you evolved differently," Jake said. "Your people became strong and fast. You learned to fight with claws and teeth. Humans stayed weak, so we had to become smart." By the end of the month, Jake's reputation had spread throughout the Academy. Students from other classes began asking to join his survival training. The Academy directors had to expand his program to accommodate the demand. Jake's original 24. Students had become confident survivors. They could find water, build shelter, make tools, and hunt for food. More importantly, they had learned to think creatively when faced with problems. "You have changed us," Flowsinger said to Jake one evening. "We used to be helpless without our machines. Now we feel strong and capable." "You were always capable," Jake replied. "You just needed to learn how to use your abilities." As Jake prepared for his 5th week at the Academy, he received a message from Commander Phillips on Earth. The message was brief but concerning. "Jake, we're getting reports of increased Wraith activity in the outer systems. The Federation is worried about a possible attack. Your training might be more important than we thought. Keep up the good work." Jake looked out his window at the alien sky. Somewhere out there, an enemy was preparing to attack. An enemy that could disable all the Federation's advanced technology. Jake's primitive human skills might be the only thing that could save them. The next morning, Jake decided to make his training more intensive. His students were ready for greater challenges. They had learned the basics of survival. Now they needed to learn how to fight a war without machines. Jake smiled as he planned his end. Jake's 5th week at the Academy started with unexpected news. A merchant ship carrying mixed alien crews had crashed on an uninhabited planet called Zarian 7. The ship's emergency beacon had stopped working, and rescue teams couldn't find the survivors. 3 of Jake's former students were on that ship. Flo Singer, the Mervadi cadet, had been traveling home for a family ceremony. Zar Thul was conducting research on the planet's minerals. Bright Spark was part of a scientific expedition. "Captain Morrison," Velkoff said during their morning meeting, "we have lost contact with the merchant vessel Star Trader. Our rescue teams found the crash site, but the survivors are gone. We believe they are trying to reach the planet's communication station, but it is very far away." Jake felt worried about his students. Zarian 7 was a harsh planet with dangerous weather and little food. Most aliens would die there within days. "How long have they been missing?" Jake asked. 6 days, Velkoff replied. "We fear the worst." Jake shook his head. "If my students are alive, they'll stay alive. I taught them well." For the next month, Jake continued his classes while thinking about the missing ship. He taught his current students advanced techniques. They learned how to hunt larger animals, how to preserve food for long periods, and how to navigate using only the stars. Then, amazing news arrived. The survivors from the Star Trader had been found. All 43 crew members were alive and healthy. They had walked across half the planet to reach the communication station. "How did they survive?" asked the Academy's medical officer, Dr. Scale-Bright. The answer came from the rescue team's report. Jake's 3 students had taken charge of the group. They had found water, built shelters, and organized hunting parties. They had kept everyone alive for 6 weeks in one of the galaxy's most dangerous environments. Flo Singer used her water-finding skills to locate hidden springs, the report stated. Zarthul made weapons and tools from the ship's wreckage. Bright Spark learned to create fire without his natural abilities and taught others to do the same. But the most impressive part was how they had worked together. The 3 students had combined their different abilities to solve problems that would have been impossible for any single species. "This is remarkable," Velkov said as he read the report. "Your students saved 40 lives using nothing but the skills you taught them." News of the rescue spread quickly through the Federation. Jake's teaching methods were no longer seen as interesting experiments. They were recognized as essential skills that could save lives. The Galactic Federation's High Council sent a formal request to expand Jake's program. They wanted him to teach not just cadets, but experienced officers, scientists, and even diplomats. The Federation recognizes that Captain Morrison's training fills a critical gap in our education system. The official message stated, "We request that his curriculum be expanded to include advanced survival techniques, resource management, and crisis leadership." Jake found himself teaching classes to some of the most important people in the galaxy. Admiral Voidstrike, commander of the Third Fleet, attended lessons on battlefield survival. Dr. Mindweaver, the Federation's leading scientist, learned how to conduct research without advanced equipment. The most challenging class was for diplomats. These aliens were used to comfortable environments and formal negotiations. Jake had to teach them how to survive in hostile territory while maintaining their diplomatic missions. Diplomacy doesn't stop working just because your technology fails. Jake explained to a group of ambassadors, "You still need to communicate, negotiate, and solve problems. You just have to do it with different tools." Ambassador Silver Tongue, a tall alien with a voice like singing crystal, raised his hand. "Captain Morrison, how can we maintain formal diplomatic protocols in survival situations?" Jake smiled. "Sometimes the best diplomacy is sharing your food with someone who's hungry. Sometimes it's helping them build shelter. Actions speak louder than words." He taught the diplomats how to use basic survival skills as diplomatic tools. Sharing water with enemies could start peace negotiations. Teaching survival techniques to other species could build trust and cooperation. "Your human approach is very different from our traditional methods," Silvertongue observed, "but it is also very effective." During his 7th week, Jake received a visitor he hadn't expected. Dr. Amy Chun, a human psychologist from Earth, arrived at the academy to study his teaching methods. "The Federation wants to understand why your techniques work so well," Dr. Chun explained. "They're hoping to apply your methods to other areas of education." Jake took Dr. Chun to observe his classes. She watched as his students learned to track animals, predict weather patterns, and navigate through dense forest. "This is fascinating," Dr. Chun said. "Your students are learning to think like humans." "What do you mean?" Jake asked. "Humans evolved as persistence hunters," Dr. Chun explained. "We learned to track prey for long distances, to read environmental signs, and to adapt to changing conditions. Most other species evolved differently. They became specialists in specific environments or developed advanced technology very quickly." Jake nodded. He had noticed that his alien students thought differently than humans. They were incredibly smart, but they approached problems in very structured ways. "The Federation species are brilliant," Dr. Chun continued, "but they're not used to improvising. They expect problems to have clear solutions. When their technology fails, they don't know how to adapt. So my job is to teach them to think more." "Like humans?" "Exactly. You're teaching them to be flexible, creative, and resourceful. Those are uniquely human traits." Jake's most difficult student was a being called Nexus Prime. It was part of a hive mind species that shared thoughts and decisions across their entire civilization. Nexus Prime had never made an individual decision in its entire life. I do not understand how to function alone, Nexus Prime said during a private lesson. My people always think together. We share knowledge instantly. We make decisions as a group. But what happens if you get separated from your hive? Jake asked. Nexus Prime's form flickered with distress. That has never happened. We are always connected. Jake realized this was a deeper problem than he had thought. The Nexus species was completely dependent on their hive mind connection. If that connection was ever broken, they would be helpless. We're going to practice being alone. Jake said, I want you to make decisions by yourself. The training was slow and difficult. Jake started with simple choices. Which path to take through the forest? Which berries were safe to eat? Which materials to use for building shelter? Nexus Prime struggled with every decision. It kept trying to contact its hive mind for guidance. When that didn't work, it would freeze up and wait for instructions. I cannot do this, Nexus Prime said after a particularly difficult lesson. I am not meant to think alone. Yes, you are, Jake said firmly. You have a brain. You can observe and learn. You can make choices. You just need to trust yourself. The breakthrough came during a hunting exercise. Jake had set up a scenario where Nexus Prime needed to track and catch a small animal. The being had to make dozens of quick decisions without any help from its hive mind. For the first time, Nexus Prime succeeded in his solo task. It tracked the animal, set a trap, and caught its prey. The being glowed with pride and excitement. I did it myself, Nexus Prime said in amazement. I made all the decisions. I solved the problem alone. How does it feel? Jake asked. Strange, frightening, but also liberating. I never knew I could think independently. Word of Jake's success with Nexus Prime spread throughout the Federation. The hive mind species was one of the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy. If Jake could teach them individual thinking, he could teach anyone. The Zephyrian government made Jake an offer he had never expected. They wanted him to stay permanently as Director of Advanced Survival Training. The position came with a salary equal to a Federation admiral and a research budget of unlimited size. You could establish a permanent academy, Velkoff explained. You could train instructors from every species in the Federation. Your methods could be taught throughout the galaxy. Jake was tempted. The opportunity to help so many different species was incredible. But he also felt loyal to Earth and the human military that had trained him. I need time to think about it, Jake said. Of course, but please consider carefully. Your work here is more important than you may realize. That evening, Jake sat in his room and thought about his decision. He had only been at the academy for 2 months, but he had already changed the lives of hundreds of beings. His students were more confident, more capable, and more independent than they had ever been. But there were troubling reports from the outer systems. Wraith ships had been spotted near several Federation colonies. Intelligence suggested they were planning something big. Jake remembered his original mission. He was supposed to teach basic survival skills to prepare for a possible war. If the Wraiths were really planning an attack, his students would need every skill he could teach them. The next morning, Jake made his decision. He would stay at the academy for now, but he wouldn't commit to a permanent position. There was too much work to do, and not enough time to do it. I'll extend my assignment, Jake told Velkoff, but I can't promise to stay forever. That is acceptable, Velkoff. Rep. The war began without warning. Jake was teaching his advanced class how to make explosives from common materials when the emergency alarms started screaming throughout the academy. Red lights flashed in every corridor, and loudspeakers announced the terrible news. All personnel report to emergency stations. The Federation is under attack. This is not a drill." Jake's students looked frightened. They had heard about the Wraiths, but none of them had ever seen real combat. Jake felt his heart racing, but he kept his voice calm. "Everyone stay together," he said. "We're going to the command center to find out what's happening." In the command center, chaos filled the air. Alien officers ran between computer screens, shouting orders in dozens of different languages. Admiral Voidstrike stood at the main display, his face dark with worry. "Captain Morrison," the Admiral called out. "We need you here." Jake approached the display screen. It showed a map of Federation, space with red dots marking enemy positions. There were dozens of them, scattered across 3 different star systems. "The Wraiths have launched a coordinated attack," Admiral Voidstrike explained. "They're hitting military bases, colonies, and communication centers simultaneously." "What about our fleets?" Jake asked. "That's the problem." The Admiral pointed to another screen. "The Wraiths have a new weapon. It's some kind of electromagnetic pulse that disables all technology within a 50 light-year radius. Our ships are dead in space." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. All technology? Everything. Computers, weapons, life support, communications. Our crews are trapped in metal coffins floating in space. Jake thought about his students scattered throughout the Federation. Flo Singer had graduated and joined the Navy. Zar Thul was serving on a research station. Bright Spark was part of a diplomatic mission to the outer colonies. "What about the crews?" Jake asked. "Are they surviving?" "Admiral." Voidstrike's expression was grim. "Some are. The ones who learned your survival techniques. The others." He didn't need to finish the sentence. Over the next few days, reports trickled in from across the Federation. The news was both inspiring and heartbreaking. Many Federation ships had been lost when their crews couldn't survive without technology. But others had found ways to adapt. The reports that interested Jake most were about his former students. Flo Singer had taken command of her ship when the captain panicked after losing all systems. She had organized the crew to jury-rig life support using manual pumps and filters. They had survived for 3 weeks before rescue arrived. Z. Arthal had done something even more impressive. When his research station lost power, he had led a team to the planet's surface. Using only hand tools and knowledge of the local environment, they had built a communication system from crystal formations and metal wire. Their distress signal had saved 2 other stranded ships. "Your students are becoming legends," Dr. Chon told Jake. "They're proving that human skills can work for any species." But the most amazing story came from Bright Spark. The Luminal had been on a diplomatic mission when the Wraith attack disabled their ship. Instead of giving up, Bright Spark had used his natural energy abilities in a completely new way. He had learned to channel his power through improvised conductors, creating a primitive but effective communication system. "I remembered what Captain Morrison taught us," Bright Spark reported. "Technology fails, but intelligence doesn't. I used my energy like a human would use fire." The success of Jake's students caught the attention of the Federation High Council. They made an emergency decision that surprised everyone. They wanted Jake to take command of a special strike force. "This is unprecedented," Velkoff explained. "The Council has never given command authority to a human before. But your students have proven that human survival techniques are our best weapon against the Wraiths." Jake felt overwhelmed. "I'm not a fleet commander. I'm a survival instructor." "You're the only person in the Federation who understands how to fight without technology," Admiral Voidstrike said. "We need you to lead us." Jake's new command was unlike anything in Federation history. His strike force included ships from 12 different species, but they were all stripped of advanced technology. Instead, they carried basic equipment that would work even if the Wraiths disabled their systems. His crew included many of his former students. Flo Singer became his navigation officer, using her water-finding skills to locate hidden resources on planets. Zar Thul served as his communications specialist, building relay systems from salvaged materials. Bright Spark worked as his scout, using his energy abilities to power simple detection equipment. "This feels like going back to ancient times," complained Commander Stoneclaw, a reptilian officer from the Saurian Empire. "That's exactly the point," Jake replied. "The Wraiths expect us to be helpless without our technology. They won't expect us to fight like our ancestors did." Jake's plan was simple but dangerous. Instead of trying to match the Wraiths' advanced weapons, they would use stealth and survival skills to get close to enemy positions. They would fight like guerrilla warriors, striking fast and disappearing before the enemy could respond. Their first mission was to destroy a Wraith communication relay on the planet Cosmos 9. The planet was covered in dense jungle and had no native technology. It was the perfect environment for Jake's kind of warfare. "We're going to land far from the target," Jake explained to his team. "We'll live off the land for 2 weeks while we approach the relay station. When we attack, we'll use weapons made from local materials." His crew looked nervous. Living in a jungle for 2 weeks without technology seemed impossible to most aliens. But Jake's former students were excited. This was exactly what they had trained for. The mission began badly. Their transport ship was damaged during landing, and they lost most of their supplies. A normal Federation team would have called for rescue. Jake's team saw it as an opportunity. "We don't need supplies," Jake told his crew. "We have everything we need right here." He pointed to the jungle around them. "Food, water, shelter, weapons. It's all here. We just have to know how to find it." Over the next 2 weeks, Jake's mixed species team learned to work together in ways that surprised everyone. The Saurians used their natural hunting instincts to track prey. The Mervadi found hidden water sources in the jungle. The Luminals learned to control their energy output to avoid detection. Most importantly, they learned to think like humans. When they couldn't find food, they made traps. When they needed tools, they crafted them from wood and stone. When they got lost, they navigated by the stars. "I never imagined we could survive like this," said Commander Stoneclaw, after they had successfully lived in the jungle for a week. "Without technology, I thought we would die in hours." "Your ancestors survived for millions of years without technology," Jake reminded him. "Those instincts are still inside you. You just needed to remember how to use them." The attack on the Wraith relay station was perfect. Jake's team approached under cover of darkness, moving through the jungle without making a sound. They used wooden spears and stone knives instead of energy weapons. They communicated with hand signals instead of radio. The Wraiths never saw them coming. The alien creatures were so focused on their advanced sensors that they didn't notice enemies approaching on foot. Jake's team destroyed the relay station and escaped into the jungle before the Wraiths knew what had happened. How did they do that? The Wraith commander was heard asking on intercepted communications. "Our sensors showed no approaching ships. Our detection systems found no energy signatures." That was exactly what Jake had hoped for. The Wraiths were used to fighting enemies who relied on technology. They didn't know how to fight enemies who used primitive tactics. News of the successful missions spread throughout the Federation. Jake's methods were no longer seen as interesting experiments. They were recognized as the key to winning the war. More importantly, Jake's success inspired other Federation forces. Ships that had been helpless after losing their technology began to fight back using basic survival skills. Crews learned to navigate by stars, communicate with signal fires, and fight with improvised weapons. The tide of the war began to turn. The Wraiths found themselves facing an enemy they didn't understand. Federation forces that should have been helpless were instead adapting and fighting back. Jake's most challenging mission came when the Federation High Council asked him to lead an assault on the Wraith homeworld itself. The planet was heavily defended and surrounded by electromagnetic pulse generators that would disable any approaching technology. "This is suicide," Admiral Voidstrike said during the mission briefing. "No one has ever successfully attacked the Wraith homeworld. No one has ever tried attacking it without technology," Jake replied. His plan was the most ambitious mission in Federation history. A fleet of 100 ships would approach the Wraith homeworld using only basic navigation. They would land on the planet's surface and live off the hostile environment for months. While they searched for the central command facility, the mission required every survival skill Jake had ever taught. His crews learned to breathe the planet's toxic atmosphere using improvised filters. They found water in underground caves and ate native plants that would have poisoned normal aliens. Most importantly, they learned to work together as a single unit. Species that had. The war was over, but Jake Morrison faced the hardest decision of his life. He sat in his quarters aboard the Federation flagship, staring at the official document that had arrived that morning. The Galactic Federation High Council was offering him something no human had ever been offered before. Director of Survival Sciences for the Galactic Federation. Jake read the title aloud. Lifetime appointment. Unlimited budget. Authority over survival training for all Federation species. The offer was incredible. Jake would become one of the most powerful beings in the galaxy. He would have the resources to establish survival academies on hundreds of worlds. He could train instructors from every known species and spread human survival techniques throughout the cosmos. But accepting the position meant leaving Earth forever. It meant giving up his commission in the human military. It meant never seeing his home planet again. A knock on his door interrupted his thoughts. "Come in," Jake called. Captain Rick Hayes entered the room. Rick was Jake's oldest friend and fellow survival instructor. They had trained together for 15 years before Jake came to the academy. Rick had arrived 3 days ago with a team of human specialists to help establish the new survival program. "Still thinking about the Council's offer?" Rick asked. "Yeah," Jake replied. "It's a big decision." Rick sat down across from Jake. "The other instructors and I have been talking. We think you should take it." Jake looked surprised. "Really? I thought you'd want me to come back to Earth." "Earth will always be there," Rick said, "but this opportunity won't. You've done something amazing here, Jake. You've changed how an entire galaxy thinks about survival. Don't throw that away." Over the next week, Jake received visitors who all wanted to influence his decision. Admiral Voidstrike came to thank him for winning the war. Velkoff explained how important Jake's work was to the Academy. Even some of his former students traveled across the galaxy to see him. "Captain Morrison," said Flowsinger, "you taught us that survival is about more than staying alive. You taught us that we can be strong and independent. That knowledge has spread to millions of beings throughout the Federation. Your teaching methods are being used in schools, military academies, and research stations," added Zarthul. "Children who have never seen combat are learning to think creatively and solve problems independently. You started something that's bigger than any of us," Brightspark concluded. "But it needs guidance to continue growing." The most important visitor came at the end of the week. Kate Morrison, Jake's sister, arrived at the Academy. She worked as a diplomat for the Earth government and had been negotiating with the Federation for months. "Jake," she said as they walked through the Academy gardens, "I have news from Earth. The government is considering a formal partnership with the Federation." "What kind of partnership?" Jake asked. "A full alliance. Trade agreements, technology, sharing, mutual defense treaties. It would change everything for humanity." Kate stopped walking and turned to face her brother. Your work here has shown the Federation that humans have something valuable to offer. Not just survival skills, but a way of thinking that other species need to learn. So you think I should stay? I think you should do what you believe is right. But I also think you should know that your decision will affect more than just your own life. That evening, Jake made his choice. But it wasn't the choice anyone expected. He called a meeting with the Federation High Council, the Academy directors, and his fellow human instructors. The main conference room was packed with beings from dozens of different species. I've made my decision, Jake announced. I will accept the position of Director of Survival Sciences, but with conditions. The council members looked at each other with surprise. No one had ever tried to negotiate with their offers before. First, Jake continued, I will serve for 5 years, not for life. During that time, I will establish the program and train instructors from every Federation species. After 5 years, the program should be able to run itself. Second, I want to bring a team of human instructors to help me. Captain Hayes and his specialists will serve as my assistant directors. We'll need human perspective to make this work properly. Third, after my 5-year term ends, I want to split my time between the Federation and Earth. 6 months here, 6 months at home. That way, I can continue the work while maintaining my connection to humanity. The council deliberated for an hour before returning with their answer. They accepted all of Jake's conditions. Your terms are reasonable, announced Council Leader Prime Thought. The Federation recognizes that your connection to humanity is part of what makes you effective. We agree to your proposal, the establishment of the Federation Survival Sciences. Academy took 2 years. Jake and his team of human instructors worked with alien educators to create a curriculum that could be adapted for any species. They built training facilities on 12 different worlds, each designed for different environmental conditions. The most challenging part was training alien instructors to think like humans. Many species had trouble understanding concepts like improvisation and creative problem solving. They were used to following precise procedures and protocols. Teaching survival isn't just about showing techniques, Jake explained to a class of instructor candidates. It's about teaching people to trust themselves when everything goes wrong. His students included some of the most brilliant beings in the galaxy. Dr. Mindweaver learned to teach scientific research using only basic tools. Ambassador Silver Tongue developed diplomatic techniques that worked in primitive conditions. Even Nexus Prime became an instructor, teaching other hive mind species how to function independently. The program's success exceeded everyone's expectations. Within 3 years, survival training had become mandatory in Federation schools. Military academies across the galaxy were teaching Jake's combat techniques. Even civilian populations were learning basic survival skills. More importantly, the training was changing how Federation citizens approached problems. They were becoming more creative, more independent, and more confident. The skills Jake taught went far beyond survival. They were life skills that made everyone stronger. You have fundamentally changed our civilization, Velkoth told Jake during his 4th year as director. Our people are no longer afraid of technology failure. They know they can survive and thrive using only their intelligence and determination. Jake's proudest moment came during his final year, when he attended the graduation ceremony for the first class of fully qualified instructors. 200 beings from 47 different species had completed the intensive training program. They were ready to teach survival skills throughout the galaxy. Today, you become more than instructors, Jake told the graduates. You become guardians of independence. You will teach others that true strength comes from within, not from machines. Among the graduates was Flowsinger, who had become the first Meravati survival instructor. Zarthul had developed new techniques for desert survival. Bright Spark had created energy-based survival methods that other luminals could learn. "We learned from the best," Flowsinger said to Jake after the ceremony. "Now we'll make sure his knowledge reaches every corner of the galaxy." As Jake's 5-year term came to an end, he looked back on what he had accomplished. The Federation Survival Sciences Academy was operating on 37 worlds. Thousands of instructors were teaching millions of students. The knowledge that had started with one human survival expert had spread throughout galactic civilization. On his last day as director, Jake received a final message from the Federation High Council. It was a simple statement, but it meant everything to him. "Captain Morrison, your work has made the Federation stronger, more independent, and more united than ever before. The survival skills you taught have become survival wisdom that will be passed down for generations. Thank you for showing us that true strength comes from the ability to adapt, overcome, and survive." Jake packed his few belongings and prepared to return to Earth for his 6-month rotation. He would be back at the Academy in half a year, but now as a rotating instructor rather than full-time Director Dot, as his transport ship lifted off from Kepler 442b, Jake looked down at the Academy one last time. The buildings had expanded far beyond what he had first seen 5 years ago. Training grounds spread across the landscape. Ships from dozens of worlds brought new students every day. Jake smiled as he watched alien cadets practicing the basic skills he had taught his first class. Making fire with flint and steel. Finding water by reading plant patterns. Building shelter from natural materials. The techniques were simple, but their impact had been revolutionary. Jake had not just taught aliens to survive. He had taught them to be human in the best possible way. He had shown them that intelligence, creativity, and determination were more powerful than any technology. Rick Hayes, who had taken over as acting director, sent Jake a final message as his ship reached orbit. "The program is in good hands," Rick wrote. "Your students have become teachers. Your teachers have become leaders. The galaxy is a different place because of what you started here." Jake settled back in his seat as the ship jumped to hyperspace. He was going home to Earth, but he knew he would return to the Academy soon. There was still work to do, still students to teach, still knowledge to SH.